Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I see a few people are with us already in the session. Thank you for joining us. I know it's toward the end of the day, but hang in there. We have some exciting discussions coming up this session and the one after this, which will be the last one for the day. My name is Marwan Ahmed. In case you just joined us, we're not here earlier. I'm the organizer and the president of American Halal Council. And with us today, two important speakers, Elizabeth Myers and Mustafa Devduki. I will be giving an introduction shortly. We're just waiting for him to join us on the session. So bear with us. While he is joining, let me play one of our sponsors' messages for the event.
Over the past decade, halal certified products and services have become a global trend, eclipsing just over $2.4 trillion in 2019. Industry leaders and market experts forecast a rapid increase in demand and
I just lost the audio, Marwan.
Has committed consumers to the wide appeal of the halal cuisine. Now is the optimal time to take advantage. But how? What is halal? What are the requirements? How much does it cost? Am I eligible? There are no poor questions. And here at Halal Watch World, we have solutions and answers to all of your halal certification needs. Our seal of approval adds credibility to your establishment and provides confidence to the nearly 1.9 billion halal consumers across the globe. With our certification services, you gain access to government bids, B2B referrals, and expert consultation. We service a variety of industries from manufacturers to restaurants and certify food products, cosmetics, flavorings, and much more. More than just a product or a service, halal is a lifestyle. Halal means you believe in pure, wholesome products, conscious consumption, the humane treatment of animals, and a balanced environment. As we celebrate our 30-year anniversary with excellence in service, we invite you to join an ever-growing corpus of thriving companies. Learn more about how to get involved. Our team of dedicated specialists are on standby. Contact us or schedule a free consultation on our website. Experience the benefits that come with a halal certificate. Halal Watch World, the gold standard.
Thank you, our sponsor, Halal Watch World. And I apologize for the glitch in the sound. You can watch the entire video or if you go to the Expo section and enter the Halal Watch World booth. The video could be played there whenever you are available to watch it. So while we are waiting for our second speaker, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth and move forward. So the title of today's session, this session is, are halal laws only on paper? Who regulates or enforces them? So our first speaker is Elizabeth Meyer, who is our summit director. But what many people don't know about Elizabeth, that she's a lawyer. And she's an adjacent professor at American University, Washington College of Law. She's a lawyer with a background in business and journalism. Elizabeth Meyer is an expert in advocacy and communication and has extensive knowledge of policies and culture of the Middle East and North Africa. She has advised US and Middle East-based organizations and doing business in the region, women's entrepreneurship and investment opportunities. Elizabeth, it's all yours. You're muted for some reason. Welcome, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you for joining us.
أهلا يا مروان.
Thank you. So yeah, we'll start with Elizabeth, and then we'll move on to your presentation. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me try again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
And I can.
Hello, Mustafa.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
So I was actually hoping that Mustafa would go first because he has much more experience on the federal side of things, because I was planning to give a brief overview of the limited state regulation that there is in the halal space. So I'm going to skip over the USDA issues for now and go right into state regulation. The states, now just without getting into a law school exam here, we have a system of regulation in this country that is, the states are the primary regulators, but the federal regulators cover what we consider to be interstate commerce, which is pretty much everything. And so the halal industry is one of those industries that one would think would be heavily regulated at the federal side, the federal level. But in fact, we don't find that. And so there has been, as one of our earlier speakers, Habiba, I think, was talking about, a big movement on the state level in various states to get states to regulate and pass laws that cover the verification or to avoid misrepresentation, to encourage transparency in the halal market. So there are currently about 9 states at the moment that have any kind of regulation of the halal space. And they are California, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Texas, and Virginia. And they all have laws governing the halal industry. And in each of those states, the sale and or marketing of fraudulent halal meat is at least a misdemeanor. So that's one common thing. But each of the states is quite different. And while some of the states are modeled on the same kind of other legislation, let me just go through the states one by one to give you just a flavor of what kind of regulation they have on the books. And I'm hearing some noise, which is a little distracting. Could I ask Mustafa to mute? Would you mind?
To use what?
To mute your mic.
Oh, unmute my microphone.
Yes, thank you. That's why I'm looking distracted, because I hear these like little voices in my ear. Thank you very much. So starting with Illinois, Illinois has a Halal Act that was passed in 2002. And that statute prohibits the false representation and mislabeling on non-halal products as halal. But interpreting the compliance and enforcement of this statute has proven somewhat problematic for a number of the reasons that we've already talked about today, which is the main one, that there's no uniform standard for what constitutes halal. And the standards that have been used can vary widely from region to region, businesses to businesses. So, but any establishment in Illinois that sells both halal and non-halal food products is required also to post a sign at least 4-inch letters high to let customers know that both halal and non-halal products are sold. So another Illinois statute, so that's the particular halal statute, but there's another Illinois statute, the Illinois Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Business Practices Act, that's not specifically in the halal space, but it also makes it unlawful to falsely advertise food as halal. So this one is a consumer protection statute that is common throughout many states that covers all kinds of advertising and not just with regard to halal products. There is also potential liability under this Illinois Consumer Fraud Act for violations of the Department of Agriculture mandates. In the state of Maryland, that state requires businesses to display a disclosure statement. And that disclosure statement requires requires the business to show that the basis of its representation that the food is halal, and to specify also the practices relating to the preparation, handling, and sale of the food. And what's useful about these disclosure statements is that they're available online so that Maryland consumers can easily determine whether the business selling food products actually meets the standards. And one unique feature of this is that there's also a system for filing consumer complaints. And we've heard a number of different times that, especially in the last panel, Marwan was talking about the power of the consumer. And this is another area, not just in your consumer dollars, but in actually getting the government to enforce the law. This is another area that consumers can exercise their power. Let me turn to Michigan. So Michigan, as you all probably know, is the home of the largest Muslim population in America. The statute in Michigan prohibits selling food by falsely representing it to be halal with the intent to defraud. So this has a specific intent component that's associated with the offense. And there's three situations which you can show intent by falsely inscribing the word halal on the packaging, or falsely representing any food items on your storefront to be halal, or by failing to specify which food items are halal. Now, some of the recent lawsuits against companies that have allegedly sold non-halal products as halal have originated in Michigan. And somewhat tellingly, I think, for our present time, one of the arguments that defense lawyers raise against these lawsuits is calling them frivolous. Frivolous means, oh, it's not something real. It's not something important. It's just something trivial. So this is also something that we need to combat, because just like any other food labeling issue, it's a serious matter when you mislabel halal food or you mislabel non-halal food as halal. The state of Minnesota prohibits a person from serving or selling food products that are falsely represented as halal, very similar to the other statutes. But one of the distinguishing factors in Michigan's law is that it focuses on there being an oral or written statement that deceives or leads a reasonable person to believe that non-halal food is halal. New Jersey is another, it's one of the stronger laws, one of the first states to enact halal laws, and it has some of the most stringent provisions in it. In addition to penalizing the false labeling and sale of non-halal as halal, the establishments that sell halal food must post information setting forth the procedures they follow in their purchase, handling, and preparation of the halal food. And any seller who sells both halal and non-halal products, food items, must have a halal label on their packaging. Must have a storefront sign that indicates that, and all halal food items must have a halal label on their packaging. And again, fraudulently selling non-halal items as halal can result in a pretty stiff fine of about $10,000 for the first time offenders, and can be as much as $20,000 for a subsequent offense. And this is per offense. Another feature of the law in New Jersey is that the producer or distributor of halal food must also register with the New Jersey Department of Agriculture and Markets the name and the contact information of any certifier, any person certifying the food as halal. So this is another kind of oversight measure that consumers can pay attention to. In other states, some laws have been informed by laws governing kosher food. And we've talked about kosher food and the Jewish tradition several times already in today's conference. The language of California's statute, for example, AB 1828, which was adopted in 2002, was intentionally drafted to be identical to California's then current kosher policy. Turning now to New York, New York's Halal Foods Protection Act of 2005 requires certain businesses and individuals to register or to file with the State Department of Agriculture. These include manufacturers, producers, packers, and distributors of food which is certified as halal. And certifiers, indeed, must also register. This is all important because consumers are able to check the halal food registry in New York for information by the product name, by the certifier's name, or by the food establishment name. And businesses that sell halal food prepared on the premises must also post a certification that's readily available and visible to consumers. So going south to Texas, like the other states, makes it illegal to sell food as halal when the seller knows it's not halal, or if the seller did not adequately ensure it was halal. And companies selling halal and non-halal items must clearly display a sign that reads that both kinds of items are sold at that establishment. And finally, the last one in this brief survey, and this is brief, is Virginia, where I lived until December of last year. And it is illegal in Virginia to sell food as halal without indicating the certifier of the product or providing its website or phone number. And any person who knowingly violates the provision is liable under the statute. So looking at these 9 states, the goals of the statutes are basically the same. The goals of the laws are the same: to provide transparency and safety, and to enhance consumer access to information, and to allow Muslims in particular to be confident that the products they purchase and consume are halal. And then for consumers in general to have absolute confidence in the products they consume. So while having laws on the books is one thing, we know for sure that the implementation of those laws can be quite another. And it can depend on many factors, some of which you've already talked about today, including the lack of education, the lack of training. Certainly, maybe the biggest one is the lack of standardization, the lack of standards, the subject of one of our earlier panels. But again, the big question is, are consumers demanding that there be halal laws that are enforced that require this transparency so that they can live the lifestyle that they want to live, the healthy halal lifestyle, and ensure that their products are indeed halal? So, and Marwana already made this point, the power of the consumer coming together and demanding the same kind of transparency and assurances that other types of food have is just as strong in the regulatory and legislative context as it is in the marketplace where you vote with your dollars. And this is not just true at the state level. I think it can also depend really on who's in power at the federal level. The federal government has not really had an interest in regulating halal in any big way, the way it might regulate something else because of the religious connotation and because of the nominal separation of church and state that we are supposed to have under the US Constitution. But I actually believe that with the November 3rd election coming up fast, there is an interesting question as to whether the next government, assuming it's not the present government, will be more receptive to this kind of issue because of what we've already seen over the past 4 years, the clear targeting of Muslims and Islamophobia and indeed just the Muslim bans. And I think there's a potential, along with consumer and citizen lobbying, to get some more things done on the federal level. But in the meantime, customer power, consumer power, and citizen power is also at the state level. And that's where those laws can be broadened, they can be strengthened, and they can be urged to be enforced. So that's your, in a nutshell, state regulation.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. Very informative. Some of these facts, many of us did not know, and it is important for us as activists in the halal world, as well as members of organizations and communities, to advocate, to enforce these halal laws. And I'm sure in the question and answer session, people want to know what they can do to help enforce these laws. Otherwise, they're just on paper, right? So before we go to the next speaker, I want to thank our sponsors for the event, that without them, this could not happen. That includes, excuse me, lunch. Our co-host, American Halal Council, and our partners, CIMIC from Turkey, which is a world standard organization, Islamic standard organization, Americans for Vibrant Palestinian Economy, ISWA Halal, and US Chamber of Commerce, US Muslim Chamber of Commerce, Sharia With, Saffron Food, Helping Hand, H2 Growers, Halal Watch World Guidance Residential, and Ibrid Technologies, who helped us put together this platform and present it to you. Also want to remind you that we have a poll tab on the right side on top. If we would love to hear your opinion on these different polling and voting questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Mustafa Devduki, who joined the US Department of Agriculture, USDA, back in 1980, and the FSIS in August 1986. Dr. Mustafa was among the first food technologist group hired by FSIS to work in the field at both large and small processing plants as technologist in charge. In the 1990s, he worked as a labels reviewer and currently as international issues analyst. During the time working with the FSIS, he has been detailed to Foreign Agriculture Service, FAS, for 6 years as international marketing specialist. Please, Dr. Devduki, share your wealth and knowledge in this area so we can all be aware of the policies of USDA.
Oh, thanks, Marwan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I gonna have 2 points because Elizabeth said something very, very interesting. And this is one of the problems we met before we have this policy about halal. I'm gonna talk about meat and poultry because the FSIS control only meat and poultry, and that is what's my specialist. So I don't know anything about the other food. So between the states and the federal, in meat and poultry, if we have a policy like what we have now, any state want to have a law or a policy has to have our federal policy. That is the minimum. If they want to have it more strict, they could do that. Or otherwise, they cannot ship any meat and poultry outside the state or bringing meat and poultry in the state. So mean is, if you have a policy about federal policy that cover all the states, but if the states want to have more strict and more clearer policy or law, they could do that. But the minimum is the federal policy. That's the first point. Second point, we had a problem about, we said the state, we are not involved because in America, religion, this is not part of our policy, but, and that is how we came up with our halal policy. Deceiving the consumer. That's the word I used, deceiving the consumer. So when you are deceiving the consumer, it's a claim, halal, it's a claim. You said, my meat is the best meat in the whole United States. Yeah, it's fine, but prove it. So if you claim halal, prove it. That's the only thing we have to do, just prove it. So actually, we could go around that part by saying that, deceiving the consumer. It is, halal is a safety issue, not just matter health issue and safety issue. So that's just a 2 point I just mentioned because I went through those for years since 1992. So that is about 28 years. So anyway, I haven't said that. I just want to mention something. In early 1992, 91, we have most of the Muslim who was looking for the product. Now I'm talking about the consumer have demand on halal. They were looking for a product, halal product. They couldn't. So what they were doing is the kosher organization start having this propaganda is, if you don't have halal, you could always buy kosher. Is kosher similar to halal, which is not true. This is the first paper I wrote. And the major things we should do as a halal, we have halal interest, we have to make sure that the consumer, because until today, I have a lot of people who think kosher is halal. And if they can find halal, they can buy kosher. But if they know that is different and they want it halal, then the demand get an increase and that will help the halal issue. So having said this, what the major difference between halal and kosher? 4 things, easy to remember. And I want to make sure that more Muslim knows about it. So simple to remember and simple to differentiate between kosher and halal. Kosher can use all wine. It is still kosher. We can't, any alcohol. Number 2, enzymes. They use the enzyme in a cheese, for instance, from any sources. It's still kosher, but we look for the sources. If it's coming from the pork, that's not halal. Gelatin. The gelatin, it is halal as a kosher if whenever coming from which sources, from pork, from rabbit, from which is those animals is not kosher. But in a Muslim, in halal, we don't. We look for the sources. And also when we are pronounce the name of the God when we slaughter the animal. Those 4 things is a major, so kosher is not halal. Having said that, I'll go back to halal certificate. In 1994, when we see the kosher, it's all over the market and we don't have any halal product. I tried in my power at that time to convince our department that is we should have requirement as we have for kosher. We are not a religion country like what you said, Elizabeth. Now we don't care about religion. We are not. Our constitution sits on something. Until Mike Espy, which is the Secretary of Agriculture during that time, by the way, he's running to be a senator in Arkansas right now. And he came and asked me, one time, one guy came with a labeling and have this halal Arabic word on it. In USDA, when labeling department, every single label in meat and poultry has to be approved by the government. And every single plant, meat and poultry, different than any other food, has to visit inspectors every day. So when he comes, we look at the label, we look at the ingredient, we look at the claim, and then we have everything is okay, then we prove the label. But if any questions about the label, then we ask, you could write anything. Like say, like what I said, my meat is the best meat in the whole wide world. Yeah, prove it. And approve it, and then I prove the label for you. Came up one guy one time in a big company, I don't want to name it, and have this halal word in Arabic in a corner of the label. So I asked him, what is that? And he said, it's just a mark of the country, the company, or the something to claim the company knows by it. Or I said, this is a claim, this is halal. And what's halal? I said, it's claim. Anyway, because a big company, he took that, because I've refused to sign it, to the Secretary of Agriculture. Secretary of Agriculture called me and he said, why didn't you sign this? I said, because it's a claim and it's wrong. Anyway, didn't really care much about what I said and shipped that product to California. I was in touch with California because they have a lot of people there who were interested in halal issue. They called me back and they said, there is a product called halal. I said, I did not approve it. Or what you could do, sue the USDA, which they sued the United States Department of Agriculture for $20-some million. Mike Asby called me again and I said, what's going on? So what's halal? Explain to me. I explained to him the halal, explained to him the requirement, explained to him that is a claim and that is a safety and health claim. And we put it. Now, how are we gonna put the requirement? What requirement? Each country, for the Muslim country, had their own requirement. So I took the biggest three countries, which are Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And I said, if you can come up with some kind of requirement, you don't have to go so extreme, like because like Iran, for instance. Iran, we have to have the line of when you manufacture the product of meat, has to be facing Mecca. And there is some more strict, but I said, if you three agreed at what's the requirement, we could put those requirements, and we will have some organization. Each country will choose that organization they trust, that they will supervise how they make this product and meet the requirement of halal. This took took about 5 years actually. But in 1995, we have halal policy in FSIS was the first and still there. And I ask as a consumer, I'm back to Marwan, everywhere we put some flyers and everything, just demand halal. Shopper, I remember in 2000 or 1999, has complete section for all the food, not just meat and poultry, for halal section. And Star Consumer goes there and asks for halal. So that was the best time between 1995 and 2005. And then the demand start getting less. And of course, those industry will do it if there is a demand for it. So for export, we kept it, but locally, we really start losing the momentum about the halal issue. After we have the halal issue, now we have maps. We have about almost every Muslim organization in the United States, and we told each country to select whatever they could trust, and those the people we have them can go to the manufacturer or the plant and watch and sign a certificate that this product met the Muslim requirement. What's the requirement? I said, it depends, because again, Malaysia is still different than Saudi Arabia, different than Egypt. But in a way, we have that policy. So every country start choosing whatever Muslim organization they could trust, and we go on since and gone fine. The thing is, because of the low demand and our organization start getting less stronger. I don't know why. Yesterday, Russia start exporting poultry halal. That is agreement between Russia and the Emirate because of they have some requirement, and Russia made those requirements, and they're gonna start shipping this poultry from. I did retire a few months ago, and I know as soon as I will retire, this halal issue is gonna go in the disk, and they're gonna be less and less. We need the consumer to demand it. We have it, and I'm still willing to go to the Secretary of Agriculture to show him how much we lose business. We'll take it from the other side. If we didn't have made this requirement, we already have them. We already have the policy. The only thing is we need some pushing all the time until to become like a kosher in the United States.
So let me ask you a question, Doctor. Very, very informative information again, because people need to know this information. They need to know the policy. They need to know the rights of the consumer. So there is a policy now, and if a halal consumer suspects that something may or may not be halal, from a USDA perspective, what can the consumer do?
I will give you some example to see, and that is for Elizabeth too, to see how strong this policy is and how we enforce it. One of the plant I was visiting, when we put the policy, we didn't say, because actually they make halal and non-halal. It's huge. The Tyson's and Nicaragua and a lot of big plant, they does not do just batch for halal. And he said, well, I'm making halal and I'm making non-halal. So what we do? So we put in our policy is to have to clean and sanitize, not just clean, sanitize the line and make sure that being completely 100% sanitized. One of the big plant in Boston, I said, I don't want to waste time and waste money, and he cleaned the line and then run the other batch of halal. I took the number of that and I sent our other thing, the inspector on the field. They have things, you could just, they have, nowadays technology, they could put these things in the meat and will tell you what species inside this meat in 5 minutes. We have recalled all his product after he has a product all over the United States. What do you call it? Not just that. We went to Codex with international law, we call that the food requirement in Codex. Before we said, when we don't have anything to do with religion. We said, again, it's not a religion. It's a matter of deceiving, and this is a health for the Muslim. Now, Codex is by their requirement, halal requirement. You cannot say halal without meeting halal requirement. And they have, who's the organization you can get the certificate from? That's internationally. Now, if something happened, if there is something wrong, yes, we took them to the court and they lose millions. We did that several times.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Question to you, Elizabeth, on the state level, and you mentioned there are 9 states that have halal laws. Has any of these states enforced these laws? Do we have any records of enforcement on the local state level? Any information?
So that's a level of research that I really couldn't get into for this particular purpose, but that it is, I imagine that there are cases. I know there have been lawsuits, for example, but that's a different kind of enforcement. When there's a lawsuit, it's usually because a consumer or possibly the regulator, but normally a consumer files a suit. Or there are the possibility, as I mentioned, in a couple of states where a consumer can file a complaint with the regulator, which is the state administrative agency that regulates the enforcement of the statute. So there's that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, for the states, I mean, we're talking about, we have 50 states and only 9 have halal laws. And there are not probably strongly enforceable yet, because we need more advocacy, we need more work. The other states, the 41 other states, if somebody lives in those states, what can they do to initiate some similar halal laws and legislations in their states?
Well, most of those states are going to have some kind of consumer protection or truth in labeling law. And whether that's under the USDA or I don't know if FDA comes under that as well, truth in labeling, but certainly on the state side, there will be some kind of statute that gives them the right to sue when something is fraudulent, misrepresented, or just it's proved statute that gives them the right to file a lawsuit. Now, lawsuits are expensive, requires lawyers. It's not really not an effective remedy. So one should try and use the more, to the extent that there is a Consumer Protection Bureau, for example, in your state, then go there first and see what kinds of options there are available. See if there's a public representative, a public advocate that you can turn to for advice, and maybe even have them pursue the matter for you.
But can an average citizen initiate a legislation for halal in their states? Halal laws?
So, well, I wouldn't quite put it that way, but yes, what happens is you lobby. It's usually not effective if it's just you, citizen one, going to see your state senator or your state congressperson. But if there's certainly a strength in numbers. If there's an association that you're involved with that is willing to take that up, there are so many grassroots organizations that I mean, just as an example, in the state of New York, when I was a mere student, but I was a grassroots activist and I was involved in one of the public interest research groups. We had issues of housing and homelessness and childcare that there were people in New York just could not get those things. And childcare was something that was close to me because that's what I needed when I was in university. And so one of the things we did with the PIRG, the Public Interest Research Group, I got them to adopt that issue as one of their issues. And one of the protests that we did as a group was all of us got into a school bus with all of the kids from the child care center, from the center that was going to be defunded by the state legislature. And we took them all up to Albany and marched these little toddlers through the hallways and got media coverage. And this is advocacy. This is lobbying. So this is something that can be done, but it's really only effective when you do it in groups and when you band together.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to thank Mansour for making the comment because, oops, I lost my screen. 1 second. About your state. And yes, I agree with you, Mansour. We need to be at the table discussing these issues, because if we're not at the table, nobody's going to listen to us. And that's somebody else will make decisions on our behalf. And your example is a perfect one in the state of New York. We need to be present. We need to speak our minds and represent our community in an honest and transparent way. We cannot let others represent us, and we should advocate for that. I want to go back to... Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just add something? It's also more effective when you have organizations like, for example, the Arab American Institute, joining with other organizations, maybe CARE. I don't know if those kinds of things are feasible. Those are when you have the strength in numbers that cuts across many, millions of people. Those are there's the strength in numbers that the consumer demand, the political demand, it all comes together to be more effective when people are speaking with one voice.
Absolutely. And the American Halal Council is in that position. to rally the community and its organizations to do more advocacy. Again, it will only be empowered by the community and the consumers themselves. And I want to go back to Dr. Mustafa and ask him, now there is a halal policy. What is the next step on the federal level? How can we make that policy stronger? And how can we meet officials, like you mentioned, and tell them this is important because it's going to actually support our local economy? This is not only about the Muslims. When American companies produce halal and Muslim community buys this product, it will make the American company stronger. So it's a win-win situation. How can we advocate for stronger laws on the federal level?
Okay, there is two things actually I used to use: the consumer in the United States and also the consumer outside the United States, which they do have the big companies here have business to do with the Muslim countries around the world. You have 1.5 billion. With that, you be more stronger actually, and you have, like for instance, now we say this, that policy is not so much effective or people is following this policy. If we, for instance, send to Secretary of Agriculture, send to the Meat Federation and the Poultry Federation, we found that we see as a Muslim, we're seeing something wrong about this policy. It's not effective and it's not, people is not following it and the industry is not following. By feeling they are being watched, and including the USDA and the other big company, they will enforce it because that is in their best interest.
Okay.
So we have, and we going in a small little level, when you go to the store, Shopper, Giant, whatever, ask for halal. Do you have a meat, halal meat? If someone say, what's halal meat? Can I speak with the manager? They know it. You don't believe in 1995 to 2005, how increased that what I said, Shopper, Giant, and I could name big stores have section to halal food. That is, but if you don't demand it, if you don't ask, they're not gonna care.
So we have 2 more minutes left and we need to wrap up, but let me ask you this quickly. Mansour mentioned in his presentation earlier when he talked about halal standards that we need to create a US-based halal standard. Would it help when we go as a community and its organizations to talk to government that we already united on a standard to present?
Here is the key. When we said we want to have a requirement, halal requirement, I want to make sure that I'm not going to disturb the industry to the point that they cannot do it. I want to make sure what عندنا مثل بيقول إذا أردت أن تطاع فأمر بما يستطاع. You have to level that and take it step by step. We have now policy. I want to enforce it. 2, if there is something wrong with the policy, I demand to correct it. And if I want to add something else, then I will add to it. But if I go around with new requirement, and here it is what we need, and that is what we demand, you're not going to get anywhere.
Very good. Thank you very much. Looks like Elizabeth dropped, maybe connection issues, but very important. You're back.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you for joining back. I want to thank you both for the information, and I'm sure there's a lot more to discuss, but we just wanted to kind of initiate the discussion and the engagement so we can take this issue of halal policy and halal laws and advocacy to our local city and state and county and ask them, where is our halal policy and how is it enforced? How can we play a role in this enforcement as community and organizations? Thank you very much. I want to remind everybody to stop by the booth before you leave today. We'll be back online live tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with the first session about don't complain about COVID and business and we will give you some ideas into how to recover from business losses if your business has been hurt, and how to utilize online technology to grow your business. We have important experts in this area. Please join us tomorrow morning, plus other sessions. And don't forget, tomorrow, end of the day, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we will announce the top 3 halal businesses in the US. And some of you will be pleased and surprised of who they are. So I don't see any more questions. Yes, Brother Habib, we did discuss that. It was mentioned by Elizabeth's presentation about the 9 states. You're correct. Thank you very much. And you guys have a good afternoon and the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much yourself.
Thank you.
And you. Masalama.
Assalamu alaikum.
Allah salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.